All right, ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to be talking about European industrialization. Let me know in the comments how you guys are doing today, how you guys are dealing with the quarantine and everything. And if you have any questions about the AP exam or any presentations that you want me to do next, just let me know. So today we're not going to talk too much about innovations and like a timeline of what everything's going to happen. We're just going to kind of just point out the major innovations and what it enabled. I want to talk more about what the industrialization actually meant in the grand scheme of history. So after that, we're going to talk about the agricultural revolution, British industrial dominance, the middle class, the growing middle class, and pushbacks to capitalism. And then at the very end, we're going to discuss the pros and cons of industrialization as it was in the 18th and 19th century. So just a brief timeline here. In the 1750s, you had minor inventions such as the sewing machine, lightning conductor, and then as you started to get later on to the 18th century, you started to get more fossil fuel efficiency inventions such as like the such as like the Watt steam engine. Then you had rubber, which started to become more mainstream and more easy to acquire. The water frame, the spinning jenny, all of this contributed to industry that that was really industrialization. 1780s and later started to become some things you actually see now, like the telegraph was almost like the early telephone, widespread communications, internal combustion engine, you got your more powerful transportation and quicker transportation. Um, but let's get to the agricultural revolution now. So this was actually called the British Revolution because of, well, I mean, it happened in Britain, right? So what happened was because of these new inventions, they didn't need as much labor for a higher output and higher yields. And so they had this new machinery, stuff such as like not necessarily tractors, but like plows, they could actually drive certain machines and it would go and collect and harvest and everything for them. And these high yields actually enabled a positive feedback loop. So because they had high yields, they had more people who could go and invent, and they had more people who go and work in factories. So they just had more labor overall that would help later in industrialization. So because of this, Britain actually dominated in the early stages of industrialization from 1750 to like 1800. They were the major player, and even on from 1800, it wasn't until later that other countries started to come in to play as like real major players. Britain industrialized mainly because there's a lot of reasons. It was really just the perfect scenario. They were an island, so they didn't have to worry about any external conflict. Their internal was okay because they were they had a stable government. On top of that, they had canals going all the way through. They had railroads going all the way through Britain, so it was easy to transport their goods. So that was a lower cost to them. So they could have like industries almost everywhere, like just within the country. It didn't really matter because you had a canal like right next to you. And they also had a high initial capital because of their colonial possessions. And they had a large labor force because, like I said before, the farmers lost a lot of their jobs because the machines were coming in. So they started to reallocate those human capital to new industrial endeavors. They also had an abundance of natural resources, especially coal. They had a lot of coal, and they also had iron, a lot of iron, and just some other things like their government allowed for patents, freedom of press, and they had a really strong navy, which is why they had such large colonial possessions. And the reason that they had the head start and no one else really did was because a lot of the other countries, well, they didn't have the huge list and perfect scenario that this was, or if they had something close to that, they faced internal or external conflicts, such as France with the French Revolution. You can't really focus on industrializing when everyone in your country is fighting each other. And now we're going to talk about the middle class, and then we're going to talk about the pushbacks to industrialization. The middle class definitely expanded. It was an encouraged thing with industrialization. The middle class owned the means of production, and their jobs that they had previously before industrialization weren't really replaced by machines. It's more that they just went and they started owning the means of production instead. And so right below them were the people who operated the machines and like kept up with the machines. They owned the machines, and then the people above them were the people who owned the actual like the factories, and they had the big corporations and everything like that. The middle class was mostly skillful though, so there was some kind of social mobility you can start to see here, even though the people who had the good jobs before normally kept the good jobs. You can still see that if you had skill, you could possibly move up to the middle class, which is a big change from before, to where you were either born into it or you were not. You were born into a farm, or you were born into a wealthy merchant family. You know what I'm saying? And then the pushbacks would be mainly Marxism and Karl Marx, who preached that class struggle was like the root of all evil, and industrialization really just kind of fed class struggle, because it's like the people at the bottom are like, well, why do you just get to sit back and I get to work in my factory and I'm doing all this hard manual labor, you're just filing paperwork up there and you're getting like 100 times my paycheck, right? So that's where class struggle really stems from. That's what Karl Marx believed that he wanted. He believed in Marxism, which is not to be confused with communism. They're similar, but they're not the same. But they both kind of want, a one-class society. And then another pushback were labor unions, which were eventually allowed, but initially they weren't allowed. This is to help protect the workers from, poor working conditions, any kind of malintent of the middle class or the upper class, such as, well, even sometimes like children were sexually assaulted. It was really bad if you go up and read on some of the stuff that actually happened. But the labor unions were just there to protect the workers. And so the pros and cons of industrialization. The pros, they definitely had a higher standard of living. All the goods were very, improved. You had improved entertainment. You could farm easier, higher yields. You have an increased economy. You possibly have a chance to move up in society, and while it may not be perfect yet to where, you can just get bored and be like, okay, I have a chance, you still have, there's some opportunity for mobility there, even if it isn't the best. And productivity is increased because you're actually motivated by something, instead of like if you're going to communism, you're not really motivated because you're going to get the same pay either way, and it's not like you can get fired because everyone gets a job. And then cons, hard labor, bad conditions, like I said before, sexual assault was not uncommon. Just regular working in general, like you were working like 12-hour days. No breaks were a thing back then. And on top of that, overpopulation was, it's still a problem to this day. We're still growing at least 1% globally annually every year. And this leads to stuff such as pollution, all over the world. We're dealing with that right now, like the ozone depletion, everything like that. And that's something that we have to deal with now because of what happened back then. And on top of that, you also have unemployment, like I said before, communism, everyone gets a job. Capitalism, it's more of a dog-eat-dog world. And I think that's really the main difference. You can't really definitively say which one's better. You have to come up with your own opinion, but they're the pros and cons, so I guess you can make your own opinion. Or if you don't care, because you're just here for the AP Euro exam. I'll go back through all the sides real quick, so if you guys want to take a screenshot, and I'll go back through the videos. So we had the timeline of the agricultural revolution. We had, of the industrial revolution. Now we have the agricultural revolution. We have British dominance, as they had a head start. We have the middle class and the pushbacks to industrialization. And then we have the pros and the cons. That's it for today, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you all have a great day. Good luck on your AP exams. And I'm out. Peace.